Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Orthodox Banter with Bojan. I'm the Bojan in question, and today we are visiting baptism and how people are received into the church, that is, whether by baptism or chrismation. The title of this video is admittedly very humble, and the primary goal of this video is for people who doubt their own baptism or were, God forbid, baptized after they were chrismated, which in effect means that they were rebaptized, which is a grievous sin, and I will go into details later. I can say it right now. You were already accepted as in the church. The church has accepted your first prior baptism as the baptism, and I will go later why is it so. And you were in fact baptized 2 times, which goes against the article of the creed that says, I confess one baptism for the remission of sins. So, I think that this video actually warrants a chapters system, which I generally use on the main channel for, easy navigation, but I will use it here too because I actually plan to chop up this video and post it here on the main channel as separate videos if I find specific sections to be interesting enough. So let's see. Chapter 1, the seeds of doubt. How do we get here? How did we get here that somebody starts doubting their own baptism and perhaps even disobeying their own bishop or, well, the priest, or to put it more precisely, to disobey the bishop through their priest, who perhaps decides that the person is to be chrismated and not baptized. By the way, in this video, as always, whenever I say rebaptized, I always exclusively mean when a person is chrismated into the Orthodox Church and then baptized somewhere else. I never mean that when, for example, somebody was baptized in, some Protestant denomination and then they were baptized into Orthodoxy. In that case, the second baptism into Orthodoxy is the only true baptism. I do not call that rebaptism. I call that for the Orthodox people, just to make sure and to make clear. Okay, so how did we get here? Well, it's actually very simple. The Orthodox Church in the West is greatly disjointed. You have these, so to say, islands of Orthodox people, and then you have vast oceans of barren plains where there is no Orthodox presence. And in such conditions, people need the community. And so people, start investigating Orthodoxy, they start seeking out communities, and because the church sadly cannot provide enough of a community for a lot of people because they are too far off, the services are maybe held only on Sundays or maybe 1 or 2 additional days, so on, people start looking Orthodox communities elsewhere. And where will they seek them out? On the internet. And now, this isn't necessarily bad. However, these people are maybe somebody, who is, a catechumen, or maybe somebody who was already chrismated. So they started adding different, Discord servers that, funnily enough, do not have, clear affiliation in the sense of they're not moderated by clergy, they're not associated with a particular parish, or jurisdiction. You start reading some weird book that does not have episcopal blessing, and then ideas start getting into your head. So, and then people in the server start convincing you that you must be baptized, even if your priest has decided that you are to be chrismated, or if you were already chrismated, that you need to be rebaptized, and So they start maybe sending you different quotes of different saints and guilt-tripping you. How dare you not follow the saints? Are you more holier than Saint Baptismus of Imerja? How dare you deny Saint Baptismus, you know? And maybe there's a lot of mocking, like, oh, you want to be a chrismate? You know, it rhymes with primate. Are you a monkey? Do you confess evolution or something? And so on and so forth. And then you're essentially guilt-tripped into accepting a rebaptism. And God forbid that you have some sort of mental issues, like all of us do, and then that will be instantly be blamed on demonic attacks, which, demons do attack us where we are at our lowest, and mental health issues are their favorite targets. It's like a boss in a video game. There is a conspicuous jewel on that demon, and you need to strike it to defeat it. And that is essentially how demons see us. We have this jewel of a mental issue, and they start pressing and hitting precisely there. And of course, you're promised that as soon as you get re-baptized, or if you to disobey your priest who determined that you will be chrismated, that you need to, hop around and find a different jurisdiction where a priest will baptize you. Of course, they might even, play the Mount Athos card. Oh, they rebaptize people on Mount Athos. Are you holier than monks on Mount Athos? Are you holier than Father Baptismus of Simonopetre Simonohilandarion monastery? How dare you disobey Father Baptismus? And you are essentially guilt-tripped into being rebaptized or baptized. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, solving the issue that they've caused. So once you get baptized, you might even start feeling better, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, they were right, the demons really withdrew their attacks. If only it were so simple. There's no magical formula, there's no magic bullet against demons unless direct intervention by God's grace. And, placebo is real. A lot of things in this world work precisely as I have previously described. Veganism, yoga, transgenderism, removing gluten from your diet. People will focus on your problem, convince you that the issue is that those problems are the issues. Okay, nonsense. However, if you do X, you will be magically cured of all your ills. And people remove gluten, they start claiming that they're the other sex and that is gender. They start taking hormones, attending sex reassignment surgeries. They ditch the meat, and lo and behold, they're finally happy. But it never persists, because problem is always something much more deeper, and it is the same with rebaptism. Suddenly people start accepting you. Now you can attend any monastery on Mount Athos, and you can even become a monk if you're a guy in every monastery, and you're like, wow, things have opened so much. But you do not realize that the issue is that you're simply feeling false acceptance by people who did not want to accept you before, and that's an issue. Essentially, you were just accepted into a clique that was rejecting you before on false premises. That is not a good thing. That is not a good thing. So, people need to be aware of this. That, again, it's not that rebaptism did its magic. It's just people. So, chapter 3, no mysteries outside of the church. This is a big one, and people usually online love throwing these big, powerful slogans that do not tend to align with reality. I will list you 2 great examples. The first one is no salvation outside of the church. Now, what this clearly means is that no one who's Orthodox is damned. That's simply it. Like, you're not Orthodox, you're damned. If you're Orthodox, you might be damned, or probably will be damned, or possibly will be damned. However, that does not really align with our experience, right? Because we have so many stories in our holy tradition about people who are not Orthodox or not even Christians getting saved, like Saint Gregory and Emperor Trajan, Saint Cleopatra and her son John, who is a saint in our church and is a unique example of a pagan who was not a catechumen, had zero interest in Christianity, has died, and was saved by the prayers of Martyr Varus. So, and now he's a saint in our calendar because Saint Cleopatra had a vision of Saint Varus taking her son to the kingdom of heaven. So, and there are many stories like this. So that does not really align, so people try to temper it. Yeah, but people are still saved through the prayers of the church, so technically there's no salvation outside of the church, but through the church they're saved, or we know where the church is, but not where it's not. But the slogan does not initially mean what we think it means. And that is the same: no sacraments or holy mysteries outside of the church. That's not true. I mean, the seventh canon, I think, of the Second Ecumenical Council, mind you, lists the categories of heretics that are to be accepted through chrismation and renunciation of heresies without baptism. And I've seen people bending over to justify why this is so. The first false, I don't want to be so direct and call it false. I know that there's some inkling in truth of it, but saying these categories were already baptized, so there was no need to baptize them again. Still, does not that mean that Arians did not give birth to babies? Does this mean that Arians did not engage in evangelical work among pagans and so on? So that's a wrong take. One especially bad one was that these categories of heretics were so notoriously vicious that the church decreed that out of fear of these heretical attacks, people need to be protected and only chrismated, which, do we really believe that the fathers of an ecumenical council allowed to be threatened into submissions by heretics when they weren't? And a lot of these fathers, they were confessors of faith. They were tortured. And now they're like, oh, but what will Arians say? They might attack us. Come on, guys. I mean, for some reason or another, the church does accept some baptisms outside of the church. We can debate endlessly. My personal opinion, and I underline, underscore, bold, italic, asterisks, I emphasize this is my personal opinion. In my personal opinion, and I'm going to do the exact same thing that people do with outside of the church, there is no salvation, is that church in a way lends her grace to these heterodox baptisms. So they're still the baptisms of the church on account of the church's decision to make them so. That is, the church in a way realizes the desire of a person to follow the Lord, even though that was the baptism itself was faulty on account of ignorance, lack of Orthodox priests, delusion, and so on and so forth. But now that the baptism is done, okay, fine, we'll accept it. It was Trinitarian, it was with immersion. It's good enough, we'll just chrismate. I realize you can critique this approach endlessly, and that's fine. Again, this is my opinion. I haven't seen it. It is generally assumed that in the case of chrismation fills any lack that the previous baptism had. So it's sort of this what I've said. Now, chapter 4, baptism as the weird mystery. Baptism is quite an unusual mystery. It is the only mystery that can be celebrated by anyone, man, woman, ordained and unordained. It is the only mystery where you need progressively less water the more urgent it is. And, you know, even in the lack of water, you can sort of use sand, you know. Of course, all of these require degrees of urgency. And, well, generally, you know, somebody has to be in the danger of dying for a laywoman to be able to baptize with sand. And even in such extreme circumstances, even the priest is called to finish the baptism, probably again baptizing the person, which again accounts for its weirdness. So if you die, you're baptized, but if you don't die, you're baptized. So it's weird. The entire holy mystery is weird. It does not have to make sense. A lot of things in this world don't make sense, so why should this one specifically? So there is this amazing article on Ancient Faith Radio about the forms of baptism and how historically there were even single immersion baptisms that were accepted by the church. These were done by St. Gregory the Great. I mean, he approved them, he didn't do them personally, because some Arians started accusing the Orthodox that they were using the triple immersion to emphasize the triple essence of God, and the request was made to make single immersion to emphasize that God is one, and it was provisionally done, you know, but simply to showcase Arians that these baptisms were okay. But that article goes in detail about the form of baptism, whether sprinkling, pouring, immersion, and how a lot of what we assume to have been immersions were semi-immersions, that actually a lot of old baptistries and fonts actually did not allow for full immersion, that the person would actually just probably crouch in a pool and then were poured over, probably abundantly, so not, you know, like splash splash, but still. It's a very interesting article. I do hope that I remember to link it in the description, and if I don't, please remind me. By the way, also one more thing. Church accepting something as faulty and simply rolling with it isn't really all that weird. I think that it was in Bulgaria that it was found out that some of the bishops weren't even consecrated, that they sort of belonged to, you know, some secret services that infiltrated the church. Perhaps this was in Russia. They weren't reconsecrated, they were simply accepted as is. There's this case with I don't know who it was, maybe St. Basil the Great, perhaps even an additional case with Father Seraphim Rose, when somebody couldn't even recall if they were baptized, but they were, you know, attending church for so long and taking communion for so long that people were like, well, simply continue, you know, as you did before. There's this story from Greece about this priest who was serving the liturgy. The bishop was present. I don't think the bishop himself was serving for this reason or another. And the priest was very nervous. It was one of his first liturgies. And as he was reading the canon, as he was, you know, about to consecrate the gifts, he skipped the epiclesis, the invocation of the Holy Spirit, because the pages stuck together. And the other priest said, like, oh, make him do that part again. And the bishop said, no need. The Holy Spirit did descend, because our God is not a strict judge on a dancing competition that takes off points for every mistake. And I would like to emphasize, form is important. We need epiclesis in our services. Baptisms should preferably be full immersion. But we should not lose our wits at everything that's not ideal, because a lot of things won't be ideal. Our own personal spiritual lives are rarely, if ever, ideal, and that reflects itself on the church. And I think that is generally a good thing, because people have this weird fascination with idealism, and I will comment on that later. Chapter 5, faults of faulty reception. Now, some people, and a lot of people, like to for the lack of better word, and I think this is a true word, invent the consequences of improper receptions and faulty baptisms. These include, but are not limited to that the baptism is invalid, that you're not really an Orthodox Christian. These include that you're suffering spiritual damage, that you're more prone to demonic attacks, that the person who baptized you sinned grievously, and so on. A lot of these are pure inventions, and one that I saw recently which shocked me was by Saint Daniel Sisoev, who basically said that people who are improperly baptized are receiving communion into condemnation. These are nonsense, and I honestly haven't heard of any of these issues until this whole rebaptism debate and reception debate started quite recently on Orthodox Twitter. You know, it's simply invention, you know. So I do realize that some people need to justify proper form, and there are very good reasons to do it, but to invent this damage, I think it's simply preying on people's insecurities, and that is a sin on itself. Which leads me to chapter 6, Warlock Exorcists. I thought that this was something that only exists in red thread Catholicism. However, I was wrong. What is a Warlock Exorcist? A Warlock Exorcist, it's a my term, I haven't seen it before, is an exorcist who uses demons to obtain secret knowledge. So they would bind demons with exorcism prayers and then simply poke them with prayers to divulge information, like, oh, tell them how tell us about the new mass. Bad new mass, it barely has any grace. See, that's precisely what I believe, you know. And I've seen this, sadly, happen in Orthodoxy, where somebody was possessed. I mean, I don't doubt they were possessed, but they were claimed that they were improperly baptized. And the priest fell for it and rebaptized the person for the second time, and the problem solved itself. And what I said previously about people who are the problem, great, now the demon is gone, and you carry the sin of a second baptism on your soul. Good job, Warlock Exorcists, good job. Never listen to demons. What I said previously, they attack our weak spots, and I'm really not surprised that the priest who was willing to baptize for the second time heard that the previous baptism was an issue. Surprise, no surprise there. Chapter 7, the form of baptism. You know, generally in the West, for somebody to be chrismated, the previous baptism in the previous denomination usually needs to be, you know, in the name of the Trinity and with triple immersion. However, should we really be that strict in requiring the triple immersion part, especially because, like, majority of the Orthodox world is not baptized with immersion? Huge majority of Orthodox world, and you will notice this if you actually go to Europe and Russia, are baptized with, pouring. It might be generous pouring. Some are even baptized with sprinkling. I myself was baptized by sprinkling. Do I doubt my own baptism? Heck no. Have I preferred it for immersion? Of course. I would have loved it, but I do not doubt 1 second that there's anything wrong with my baptism in the sense of consequences. Those dreaded consequences. So the issue is essentially that a lot of converts are preoccupied with the norm, with the ritual, with doing the right stuff. Converts in general obsess over exactitude. I remember my first communion, when the priest gave me the Eucharist, there was next to no body in it. It was just blood. And for the longest time, I mean, a couple of months, I was like, was that real communion? I mean, I did take the blood, but if there's no body, I mean, do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? And that is a lot of what a lot of convert mentality does, especially when you mix in the zealousness. Oh, we need to keep bishops in check. Bishops need to apologize. bishops won't apologize for anything. Sorry to dash your hopes, but chapter 8, Mount Athos. You know, rebaptisms are not done on the whole of Mount Athos. Mount Athos hasn't got the right to question anyone's baptisms. They still do it, but again, they shouldn't do it. But because of the honor they receive, nobody is really going to, punish them. Not that they would even care if they would. I mean, I do admire Mount Athos, don't get me wrong, but it is essentially a place where a Catholic guy can go, but an Orthodox sister can't. It really shouldn't serve as a model. Mount Athos is good for Mount Athos, but it is bad when we copy those practices in our parish experience. Are you going to remove all the women from your parish? I mean, one of the reasons why people who do not take communion for the 3 liturgies in the row, according to ancient canons, are considered to be set outside of the church was because not taking communion was taken as a sign of disbelief in the validity of the Holy Mysteries served by a bishop. This is essentially what they do. They simply reject the power of church in one place to baptize people. That's not a good thing. And I do not consider Mount Athos to be this impeccable, inapproachable idol that I cannot criticize. That's a horrid practice, honestly. Chapter 9, and this is a big one. What makes baptism a baptism? Baptism, and you won't see this anywhere else, even though it's the most logical thing ever, baptism is accepted as baptism if it's accepted by the local church in a specific time. It's simple as that. You may say that I'm not baptized because I have been sprinkled on, but I'm sorry. The church here accepts that as a baptism. I'm entered in the registers with that baptism. I can be ordained. I can get married. I can be a godfather, and was. That baptism has produced priests, bishops, deacons, monks, nuns, martyrs, saints. I have attended a baptism that had a miracle of exorcism. You can see it in my exorcism in the Orthodox Church video. It was a baptism with pouring. Why would you reject somebody's baptism if the church accepts it as such? And no one in the Orthodox world doubts that baptism on account of my church accepting that as a baptism, with the exception of few fringe people on Mount Athos. Even if whole Mount Athos did it, it's a wrong thing to do. This needs to be said. If this wasn't so, we would be in perpetual loop of detecting who was baptized. Chapter 10, and I'm going to be very quick with this, my time is running out. Church is a mess, always was. It's a beautiful thing. We cannot conjure God with a proper incantation or words, and that is a good thing. We are free in Christ, and our God is not a strict judge on a dancing competition. Simply accept what the church accepts. If the bishop of your church says you're going to be chrismated, you're going to be chrismated, and you're fully part of the church. Bye.